All right, hello and welcome everyone to Dynamic Character Productions Monte Carlo exit interviews. We are beginning tonight here with exit interview number 1 for our not first boot, but first vote out. Nick Cannon, not rapper, not an actor, Nick Cannon. Nick, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Glad to see you again. Honestly, it's been a while, and I have to say, I said it in the cast assessment, but like I was so excited for your energy all season. You said it in almost every confessional. You used the word energy, and I was excited. That's what I was most excited about to see from you. So, and you brought it. For your short stay in the game, you brought it. I am here joined by my co-host Morgan Jackson. Morgan, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really enjoying the first couple episodes so far. It's been really fun watching the game back, and I'm excited to talk to Nick and get our exit interview process underway. There's always so much that you just don't see in the episodes or even as hosts, right? We don't see everything that happens during the game. So it's awesome to give Nick and our other contestants an opportunity to, you know, give us a little behind the scenes info that we might have missed along the way.
And Lilly Petzold from Survivor Exile Island, second place finisher, is here to take over as our mayor of the exit interviews. Lilly, how are you?
I'm good. I mean, it's much easier being on this side and then getting the questions answered or answering the questions, but excited to see what Nick has in store for us today. Yeah. So speaking of that, Nick, how do you feel watching back the episodes? How do you feel about your game? Just as a general, we'll dive into it, but a good intro to your walk away thoughts.
Yeah, I would say just like before we get into my gameplay, it was an absolute dream to play Survivor Monte Carlo with the dynamic character production. So it was a dream come true. So it was a lot of fun. It was really exciting to play. Obviously, a ton of disappointment in terms of being the first one voted out of Survivor Monte Carlo. Obviously, I was blindsided in my tribal and I was kind of villainified on this season, like in the early goings. And so honestly, it was a surprise, disappointed with my placement, but it was a lot of fun to play.
Yeah. And I think Ian spoke for all of us when I think we all had you in our top 5 in the cast assessments. So it comes as a shock, not only to you, but also to the 3 of us that you were our first vote out. You have a very charismatic, like what Ian said, you have a good energy, a good like aura, if you are into auras, that surround you. So it was an interesting kind of view that you were seen as like the odd man out, or maybe not a villain, but kind of what you were saying. So how do you think that happened? Do you think you made some missteps? I know a lot of people talk about every cast is different. Do you think that's what happened here?
Yeah, so I'd say there's a lot of parallels, and probably a great allegory to my gameplay is the children's book of Penelope. Going to kindergarten. And so when Penelope, the dinosaur, was going to kindergarten, she was very excited. She was very well prepared to go to kindergarten. She had a brand new backpack with ponies. Ponies, they're delicious. Her dad made her 300 tuna sandwiches and gave her 1 apple juice. So Penelope was really well prepared to go to kindergarten. But when Penelope entered kindergarten, she was incredibly shocked. And when she got to kindergarten, her classmates were children. They weren't other dinosaurs. And so she felt really afraid. She was very nervous. She was backed into a corner. And so because she was so nervous and afraid, she ate her classmates. And I would say that's very similar to how I played. So like one of the big twists on the season was we weren't put on initial tribes. So instead of having maybe like 8 or 10 people on a tribe, like a very traditional Survivor gameplay, we were 17 castaways on a beach. And so that was incredibly chaotic and hectic. out the gate. And so it was a very hectic like start to the game. 17 people is a lot of people to get through. 17 people is a lot of people to connect, make alliances, get like a feel, like develop a social game. If you like, our cast was kind of busy like out the gate. Like you had people that were running beer runs like for fantasy football purposes out in like Wisconsin with their college buddies. You had people at their brothers' weddings in Minnesota. You had people going down to Miami with their fiancés to like vacation. And so it was like all these like moving chess pieces, trying to like getting people like on schedule was a hassle. There was just so much going on. You couldn't connect with everyone. So that was another big twist. And then two, there was the high rollers room out the gate. And so I decided to enter the high rollers room and unfortunately to potentially earn an advantage. And so I entered the high rollers room. And so unfortunately I landed on the wrong color. And so I did not have an advantage. But what was announced at our first competition was all the people who did not have advantages. And so there was 5 people that had entered into the high rollers room and that did not have an advantage. And those people were kind of like the immediately like easy outs because you knew that this person doesn't have a hidden immunity idol. They don't have a 50-50 coin. You saw Connor plays 50-50 coin of the first immunity his first tribal council. You saw Shea say in a confessional, like, if there's any threat of my name being thrown out, I'm going to play my like 50-50 coin, my hidden immunity idol. And so you're trying to mitigate risk in this game. And so it's easiest to mitigate risk by voting the people that you know are not going to have that hidden immunity idol and you can't get like backfired. And so losing that first immunity challenge, there's 3 people that didn't have the advantage or confirmed hidden immunity idol going to that first like tribal council 9 that ended up not being a tribal council. And that was myself, Will, and McKenna. And me and Will, I really liked Will out the gate. I had a great energy. We were both eating rice to kind of like simulate the Survivor experience while we were on DCP. And we went to school in the same state. We lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for a while. We were both in the finance profession. I felt I could trust Will 80 to 95% in this game. And it was really tough, like being backed in that corner. And so just given the fact that there was a lot of people, I was on the bottom, like the first easy out going to that tribal council, I got a little too aggressive. The cards were stacked against me. I made a risky bet and it didn't pay off for me. And so I got a group together of 5 and said, hey, this is a group of 5. Everyone's talked together. We've had Zoom calls together. This group seems like it can mesh really well. If this 5 goes a certain way and votes McKenna out, then this is confirmed safety for that tribe. And so because I was the first one to really throw out a name, I was eating my classmates. And when you eat your classmates, you do not make friends. And so that really is what kind of dug my hole in the initial game. So I think it's a very great allegory to Penelope going to kindergarten.
That was beautiful, I have to say.
Yeah,
beautiful analogy.
Like, I actually remembered like towards the end of what you were saying that you were connecting this somehow. And I was like, when is this coming? And then you did it. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I have to say, Nick, like I was waiting for you to explain kind of why you chose to pick McKenna, or not pick McKenna, but chose to pick anybody. And I feel like all of us were kind of confused, like how that came about. And so that makes way more sense than I think we were kind of all seeing. I mean, that's like the point of these X interviews, is to get this feedback from you, like why you make the moves you do. And so I find that very interesting, and also brings up like a question for me, or something, another, I think, positive about you as a person is there's not too many new, like this is your first ever game. There's not too many new people that we've ever seen that come out and just play right from the get-go. I mean, obviously it didn't work out too well, but like usually it takes a while for maybe even the whole pre-merge for a newbie to make a decision. I mean, Lilly, you've been in Nick's shoes before. What do you think about like your cast and maybe this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure, and you'll see a lot in a lot of seasons or orgs, it's a lot of people on Zoom looking at each other asking, who do you want? And everybody kind of doing the dance of not wanting to give a name, because it's that big fear of if you say the wrong name, then, you know, what ends up sadly happening to you is everyone's biggest fear, right? And I think you tried to go about it the right way of, you wanted to go with what the majority was doing. And I think had it been maybe a different cast, it might have gone differently. Like I could see on Exile, if you had gone to either of the tribes and just kind of thrown out a name, it wouldn't have been such as a nail in your coffin as it kind of seemed like in this season. So I definitely agree. There are a lot of things you mentioned that I have questions about, but I feel like the first and the easiest to get out of the way is, as you mentioned, you bet wrong. Sorry, my thoughts escaped my mind for a minute. You bet wrong at the high rollers. So that means you kind of got placed into the challenge, and you were placed in the strategic or kind of puzzle version of the, what did you guys call it? The Knight's Move?
Yep.
Night moves.
Night moves. If you had picked which one you would have done, is that the one you would have gone with? And do you think that affected you ultimately losing that challenge?
Yeah, so had I had the opportunity to choose that challenge, I would not have, just because the numbers were stacked against you. Like that was like a fun challenge. Like I've played chess before, like I'm a strategic, logical thinker, but it's hard to kind of, when you're playing against three other really smart people, like Jonathan's a really smart guy, Will's a really smart guy. Like it's just hard when it's 1 out of 4 and there's a little bit of luck involved. And so I would have done the challenge that had the better odds of winning.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that would be a hard one to be put in for sure. And so, as you said, there's 17 people, even at the first, what was supposed to be the first tribal, you still are able to talk to all 16 other people. So these people that aren't really having to go vote can still influence the game if they wanted to, right? And so we see a lot in the episode. We don't see a lot of influence from the other side. Is that how you saw it? That they kind of took a step back so they weren't on anybody's radar?
Yeah, I think it was very early in the game still. And so you had basically, even though it wasn't separate tribes, it was basically you had a tribe of 9 that was going to tribal council that was talking all amongst themselves, because we were the ones actually voting. And you saw the tribe of 8, at least in my perspective, that tribe of 8 that had won the challenge was taking a step back in that game period.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so when you finally get put into tribes in our second episode, are you happy? I know you talk about how Will is your ride or die, and we'll get to Will, but was there anybody else you were excited to work with? Somebody you were hoping to that gets put on the other tribe?
So I had less interactions with the people in my tribe, like out the gate. And so I wasn't as excited to be like put in that specific tribe configuration. But like, honestly, like as a tribe, you're trying to go like team unity, win as many immunity challenges as possible. So I was hoping like, okay, hopefully we can win this next immunity challenge. I can have time to make those social bonds and connections and kind of work my way out from the bottom.
Yeah. And we see you try to do this with Will. What do you think was you would do if you could do over, what you would have done differently going into that first tribal? I know Ian mentioned bringing somebody's name out. Is there anything else you feel as though could have been a better move?
Yeah. So I kind of shot myself in the foot a couple of times, but like, when you think about getting people together in this game, especially when there's 17 people, you have to think about like what scales, in terms of it's really hard and very time consuming to go out and have 16 one-on-ones with people and then set up all those one-on-ones and then continuing to have those one-on-one conversations of like, okay, I heard this from someone, I've gotten this new piece of information. So I was trying to like get a couple of groups together based on we had like certain common interests, just talk about things like, hey, let's just get on a group of 4 or 5 people. And I didn't think that was going to be a problem. My first, like when we were marooned on that initial night, I joined a Zoom call like 30 seconds after like our group Zoom call ended. And so this was the beginning, very, very beginning of the game. We may have had like 5 to 10 minutes of like, holy shit, we've rummaging through our things, looking at our scrolls. And so I joined a call in session that already had 3 people on it. So I had this perception that people are already having these like group conversations, they're already connected, there's some pre-existing relationships. And so I didn't think it was like weird to get 4 or 5 people like on a call together because other people were doing the same thing. But I don't think other people saw it the same way as I did.
Yeah. I think as a newbie, right, I played Exiles my first game ever. I remember having the opposite feeling. I remember waking up the next day. I did the big group call and that was it. I went to bed, woke up, was like ready to do my own like in real life deal. And people were pulling me into calls and I was like, oh my gosh, is this what it's like? Is this how you play the game? Right. And we see a lot of that happening to people throughout this season too. So it's interesting that you kind of had the flip side, and maybe it's all about what happens that night, because you hopped right into a call, whereas maybe the other 10 people didn't. And that kind of set the tone for the rest of the game. I think that, and do you agree? Do you have any other feelings on that kind of thought process?
Yeah. And I think like one thing when I talked about like targeting McKenna of like, that's like the role, because we had 5 people on a group call. It was me, Will, and McKenna going to that first tribal council that were kind of on the bottom going into that vote because we didn't have the confirmed challenge. We didn't have hidden immunity idols. And so like Will was a close ally of mine. We had 5 people. And so if that 5 group of people had voted together and voted McKenna out, that like saves me, that saves Will, that guarantees the group of people that were on that Zoom call safety going into that first like challenge. I thought it's pretty early. You're not going to save someone because that person's really good for your game right now. Like we're on a group of 17, we're going to get split up in tribes. So like, even if you had a really good social game with someone, like that person could be on the opposite beach in 24 hours. And then I also didn't think it was the biggest move at the time because you had 2 DCP legends playing in terms of Connor and Queen Victoria. And so in my mind, everyone should have been thinking like the biggest move, like that first like tribal council, was everyone should be trying to get like Queen Victoria out. Like she knows this game really well. She's a huge threat. People are flocking to her. She's really smart. She's probably had time to reflect on this game. She knows what challenges are coming up. And I was kind of, me and Victoria probably were talking past each other a lot in terms of, I didn't know what was on her diploma. Because like Victoria, we thought she was all lying when she said like she didn't know what like the challenge or like the high rollers room was, because like she's not like a big gambler. But if you recall from Exile Island, where the tribal council where Bill was eliminated, Victoria made a huge bet to protect Greg. And by protecting Greg in that challenge, she went to rocks, and she knew by protecting Greg and going 3-3, whereas Greg and Jim, that there was a 50% chance that one of her initial tribe was going to go home. And there was a 1 in 4 chance that she was going to go home. So by not voting out Greg at that initial challenge, she's a high gambler. She's a high roller. And I think that like Exile Island gameplay influenced our season as well, because like people like Victoria is lying. She is a high roller. She's willing to go to rocks. And so I thought like the big move would be going after Victoria, but first like week, it's too early to make those huge like game changing moves. And so the not big move is going after McKenna.
I also think, like, I mentioned it during some exile exits as well, but like the first night or the first bit of strategy in the game like sets the pace for the rest of the season. And I think unknowingly, like Morgan and I kind of set the pace for the season with like the scroll, like the game, even though there was nothing going on, like the game began immediately. You had plenty of game to talk about on that first night. I mean, there was an hour and a half in between start of marooning to high rollers room. So, I mean, right away, people are like, hey, did you get the scroll? Did you go? What? And it's just, I find that interesting too. And I think that's a very good take, Nick, is that like the game began a lot quicker than it probably does. I mean, Lilly attested to it most of the time. So that's interesting. I love these.
I think it was very ironic that Connor in season 1 was always wanting to go to Exile Island to find a community idol. So he got to live out his Survivor DCP dream. So I'm very happy for Connor that he got that first immunity idol. And although he played it immediately, he got to live his dream out.
That is true. And it seems like part of your personality, and I don't know you at all, Nick, so this is a very big assumption, so you can tell me if I'm wrong. You are like a studier, right? It seems like you've watched Exile. Am I correct on that? Like you've watched it, right? You were ready when you signed up for this, even though I think Ian said it was your first game. A lot of people that play this don't do that. Like I know myself, I didn't know what I was getting into. And do you think that maybe that set a different tone for you because you've seen how this plays, right? So you're kind of like, even though you're not a veteran, you might understand more than someone that's just like virtual survivor, like let's do it. And do you think that also affected your game at all, that you were prepared, you like did your research, it seems like?
Yes and no. Like, I don't know if Penelope had 150 sandwiches that she would have been less likely to eat her like classmates if she had, like, I don't know what the trade-off or like that optimal point of like Penelope and having the backpack and tuna sandwiches. Like if she had 0, would she still eat her classmates? I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and so another thing I thought while watching, your game, and you've mentioned like Will was your person, somebody that you thought, or somebody that you could, like he did not vote you out at the end, someone that you wanted to work with and you could trust. It almost seems like your downfall was you and Will were always in the conversation with one other person and other people caught on to that. Did you ever think that that would happen, or did you think it's going to be a group call anyway, so it doesn't matter if both of us are here?
Yeah, so one, I had a person a lot smarter than me once said, where there's a will, there's a way. And so like I knew like Will was someone that could help will me to victory, or at least the merge that I wanted to. And so you heard Parker talk about in his confessional the importance of getting to 5. And so it's a lot easier to get to 5 when you have 3. And that was like my standpoint of bring someone in. It's like, hey, if we have more people, we just need, is there one person, 2 people that we feel good, we feel trust, group those people in, there's 5, that's the majority, that's numbers. Honestly, that backfired, but having that extra person can be helpful because that's one less number needed to get to 5.
That makes sense. It makes sense. See, like Ian said, I would have never had that thought process if I had played this game and somebody had told me that. So it's interesting and it makes sense. Yeah, I just have my final question we like to ask everybody if we have Facebook questions. I think Morgan is.
Yeah, before we get into Facebook questions, I am curious, Nick, do you think if you had not had to have gone to the first tribal council, like if you had won the first individual challenge, that it might have worked out differently, if Ruken still lost like you guys did? Because it kind of seemed like your vote out was really paved before you guys even lost that challenge. So I'm curious, what you think about that.
Yeah, so I think my odds obviously would have increased and the game would have been different had I won that first immunity challenge and have a little bit more breathing room. I think a big thing you guys talked about the preseason is like the time you have to play these games and how valuable that is. Like I was going through just a very stressful time period. And so like my job can be very stressful and very time consuming. And unfortunately, like when the game was playing, I had a thing come up where we were building out our strategic planning cycle for like my tech startup. And so I was putting in like 70, 80-hour weeks. And so I was working a lot. I'm on the West Coast. So you have a little bit of a timing nuance too, where like events and challenges are like maybe the event is over like 8 p.m. People are hopping on Zooms. Like I'm still working, like still like trying to Slack my boss, answer emails while like trying to be on a Zoom call. So it was harder to have that like social game aspect, which is really important. And then like two, which was unfortunate, two, like that like initial weekend. And this is not like an excuse for my poor gameplay or like an excuse for my placement, but like I used to have like two like long dogs, like a dachshund and a corgi. The corgi was having a lot of stomach issues, so I was like at the vet like 4 times that weekend while also like working those crazy hours. And unfortunately, like after that vote out, like 3 days later, my corgi passed away, so I'm down to 1 long dog. But it was just like a lot, like having your like dog pass away, having like a lot of work, have like trying to play the game. And so because like my time, the time I had to play was compressed. I had to be a little bit more aggressive, had to like get over my skis just because I didn't have the time to really make those like social connections, which it sounds like this cast is really focused on the social aspect.
That's interesting that you feel like you didn't make the social connections, because, and you would know this, but I was part of all of your Facebook message group chats. And just for like fun, trying to keep track of what's going on in the game, I would like keep track of, who's having conversations with who, what different combinations of people are talking together. And you by far were in the most number of different chats. And almost every single group chat that had more than 2 people, so like 3, 4, or 5 people, you had initiated that group chat. So you had what seemed to me, you were like trying to make all of those connections. So it surprises me that you feel that you didn't, but
yeah, I would not knock your social game at all. I feel like I feel like Morgan asked a great question. Like I don't think if you win immunity, then you don't say McKenna's name and then it doesn't overlap into the second episode. I feel like you might be being a bit too hard on yourself, actually.
Yeah, my social game, how I imagine it, like trying to relate to people is like finding like commonalities with people. Like you find someone from Grand Rapids, talk about how much you love like running on the Tobin trails and getting donuts from Robinette's and getting that beer cheese dip at Brewery Vivian, talking if you meet someone from Pittsburgh, like how you enjoy going to like, games at PNC Park and you're such a yinzer getting your like kibosca, or like I talked to Lilly about how I like hiking on the Appalachian Trail and going to tech games and being on the drill field. I was hoping to be able to connect with like a wide, diverse group of people from a lot of backgrounds, a lot of different geographies, just given my background experience. But unfortunately, that didn't kind of overlay. But I do love Pittsburgh, Grand Rapids, and Blacksburg. So enjoy being on the phone with you all right now.
Yeah, I almost feel that part of the reason why the tribe decided to vote for you was because you were making so many connections. It was almost like everybody else kind of compared notes and they were like, wait, Nick's like talking to everybody. And so I wonder if that's more the reason that you ended up getting voted out as opposed to not having the connections with people. At least that's from my perspective. Just watching things unfold in the real time. But all right, should we get to Facebook questions?
Yep.
Hit it.
Okay, first question is from Alex Trias. He asked, what do you think you've learned watching this back that you think you can use for future games you might play?
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest thing is right out the gate, you really don't want to have the cards stacked against you. And so if I had to play this game over again, I would not have gone to the high rollers room, just because you don't want to be like such on the outs. You don't want to go in that first tribal council and be in the bottom three, like fighting for your survival. So that's like something like play a little bit more conservatively out the gate. And then two, like what I've also learned is you guys also mentioned this in your pregame, like newbies are going to have a harder time being on that initial cast of 17 people. Like the ORG veterans are going to be able to roll those punches, feel out the game much faster. Like newbies expect like a traditional survivor game where you're on 2 or 3 tribes and you're going to like the typical immunity challenge. And so one thing I'm also doing coming out of this gameplay, I signed up for improv classes. And so improv, you have to roll with the punches. You don't know what your partner is going to say. You don't know what the scene is going to be. And it really helps you think on your feet and like be very creative and think through a lot of different possibilities. And so it's also helping, like if I were to play another game, like my social game, being able to like, listen better, think through things. So that's what I'm also doing to prepare for future games.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, next question is from DCP alumni Michael Zucker. He asks, how many times a day do you get confused for the other Nick Cannon? So that's the first question. And then he says, but actually, do you feel like if the makeup of each tribe shook out differently, that you would have perhaps fared better based off the conversations you had with players on the other tribe before the tribes were formed?
Yeah, so I kind of bring it on like my Instagram handles, like my social media handles are the white Nick Cannon. So I do get compared to Nick Cannon. I try to distance myself a little bit. He's made some very anti-Semitic comments and he keeps on having more children. So maybe less in common with Nick Cannon these days than I used to have before. But had the tribes shaked out differently? I don't think so. I dug such a big hole for myself. You saw Kyle in his confessional say, we really want Nick out. We really want Nick out. And so I was public enemy number 1 out the gate. And so I would have been the first boot no matter what the tribe.
All right. Now, you did already give an answer to this one, but I'm going to see if maybe you have anything else to add. McKenna asked, aside from Survivor, what is your favorite TV show and what snack would you be eating while watching?
Yeah, so one of my oldest favorite shows is New Girl. And so I mentioned that I had the 2 dogs. Like my name is Nick. My first dog, his name is Winston. And then my dog that unfortunately passed away, her name was Jess. So we were Nick, Jess, and Winston.
That's awesome. I love that.
And then you got to go with Applebee's, savory, mouth-watering, juicy Applebee's. I actually went to Applebee's yesterday for the first time, like 10, 15 years. So Mr. Jeff, if you're watching this, your advertisement is working.
Mr. Jeff.
Love it. All right. Next question is from John Millsip. You demonstrated great promise in this game despite being voted out so early. What do you think your biggest misstep was? Do you think you played unabashedly yourself and that your own personality makes playing a game difficult for you? Or do you think that with minor adjustments, you would fare much better?
Yeah, so obviously the misstep was underestimating how much like my cast was just super zeroed in on the social game. I saw McKenna as a huge threat because I thought she was going to play that Lilly game from Exile. I thought she was going to be really sweet, soft-spoken, like, oh, hey, I'm just kind of super sweet and innocent. But I thought like underneath that like super sweet and soft like exterior, she was probably going to be like someone super dangerous and someone everyone was going to take really far. So I was kind of using the fact that, oh, hey, we could guarantee voting her out. But I also had an ulterior motive of like, I think McKenna would be like super dangerous in this game. So it was like underestimating the social aspect, John. And
All right.
personality wise, I would say like it is my personality, like reach out to a ton of people. It is my personality to try to connect with everyone. So if that was my downfall, it is what it is.
All right, next question is from Greg from Exile Island. He says, besides your placement, how did playing the game match up to your expectations going into it?
Yeah, so I would say like it exceeded my expectations. It was so much fun to play. It was a lot of fun being maroon, going through the process. It was a lot of fun going through the challenges, having the Penelope throwback to the Exile Island. That was just amazing. I really wanted to like listen to Ian read the story, but I had to count in my head. So it was hard to try to do both. It does help you make like a lot of great connections. And so I've been able to meet Celestina from one of the minis. I've been able to meet Matt, who's also in Seattle, from one of the minis. And so it really opens you up. You play one game with DSP, but it really opens you up to the whole like DCP alumni and like family. So it's been a great experience and great opportunity. And so it exceeded my expectations, although my playing time was short.
That's awesome to hear. Next question from Victoria herself. After watching the first 2 episodes, was there anything that surprised you about someone or multiple people?
Yeah, I'd say I was surprised about what was on Victoria's diploma. But what like surprised me about a lot of people, I was surprised that people just didn't think Connor and Victoria were just absolutely huge threats that needed to be taken out early. And that I think a lot of people are underestimating like how far they could potentially go in this game. They know this game, they think through this game, they know what it's like. And I probably underestimated the social connections people had from playing other games. It didn't realize that Kiley and Philly Mike are a pair. And so I think like one thing that would really help newbies is like these online Survivor games, there's a huge information disparity. Like you don't know what you don't know. You don't know that like people are playing different sides, like pretending to not be an alliance when they're like that actual ride or die. You saw in Greg and Mackenzie's Broski season, they made it all to the way to the end, and they were the secret like duo alliance. And Mackenzie was always, who the fuck is Greg? And like trying to play it off. And so there's just a lot of danger and a lot of importance on like those ORG relationships that it can be hard as a newbie. And so maybe one thing that someone could do that would be very beneficial to the ORG community is create like a running database of all the people who have played, all the people that have played together, like what tribes they're on, what alliances they are. So maybe that's an action item and project for me to take on and create this like Google sheet, just so there's full transparency when everyone goes into a future game. These are the people that they've played together. These are the alliances that were in those games. And so you don't have to have another situation where people are at an advantage, at a disadvantage. Everyone's kind of on equal playing field.
I think that's a great idea, Nick. I have also experienced not realizing that people know each other in games that I have played myself. So it's definitely a big factor. Like you said, you don't know what you don't know. So
yeah, and believe me, I don't think anyone's taking that huge database project on anytime soon. So like you're free whenever you're ready for it. We'll get you started.
All right. Next question is from Elijah. What was your expectation when you created all those separate majority chats, particularly on the first almost tribal? Did you not predict people would talk amongst themselves and figure out your acts? And do you regret not playing more low key and sticking with only enough people to make a majority?
No, so it's really hard to get to know 17 people in a really quick standpoint. You're not going to be able to hit everyone. And so you got to rely on having like small groups, and people are able to say like, hey, I'm in this group of 4, hey, this group of 5, let me add 2 or 3 people. Like the owner should not have been on me to like try to meet like everyone. And so I don't like regret that. I know people are going to talk in this game. So it was just really tough being on 17 people tribes. And so you don't know how to expect that.
Fair enough. Celestina says, Nick, you're great. Washington forever.
Go Cougs.
And our final question is from you yourself. So, how did your career experience as an investment banker and now member of the corporate strategy team of a supply chain tech startup impact your gameplay and thoughts going into the game?
Yeah, so I was overconfident being an investment banker, being in like corporate strategy. And so when you're in corporate strategy, what you do every day is you're trying to figure out what's the strategic rationale of aligning with someone, of merging with a company. And so you're basically thinking through like all the different scenarios of what could happen, why are things a certain way, and you're trying to understand what is that strategic rationale if we merge, if we partner together. And so I work in the supply chain industry at a tech startup. And so the supply chain industry, it is where it is today. And you're hearing all the chaos, the nuttiness going on because companies within supply chain have not decided to have strategic alliances, have mergers. And so what's going on is those companies have typically just played a social game of saying, hey, because I play golf with my buddy Joe, he's going to get me the best deal. And so me and Joe are going to work together, but we're going to ignore everyone else. And so I thought that I had a really good understanding of what the strategic rationale of moves would be, just given my like background. And obviously that didn't work out. And so I'll probably make a career change. I've been watching a lot of Survivor Micronesia and China. And so James is someone who I really want to be a grave digger now because I was really good at digging my own grave. And not good at like understanding the strategic rationale behind moves. And so one thing I'm also doing, someone had the question of what was your takeaways of this game, is I'm taking some online negotiation courses from Harvard Law School, just because I failed in a negotiation. I failed in my ability to influence others to understand that what I had outlined, there was a strategic rationale in terms of us having safety. And so it was one of the action items and takeaways of the game.
DCP first.
That's a very thorough answer.
DCP first, asking your own question and then providing a quality answer to it. Will it continue throughout the season? Nick, you might have just set a precedent for the rest of Monte Carlo. I have a question for you. Last year, Denny would always ask about people's, like, would they play again? I want to start asking, so you're starting it, Nick. Who were you most impressed by in the cast, just in like your episodes? So like you technically have 2 episodes. Like who were you most impressed by on the cast and why?
Yeah, I would say Andrew's really impressive. He has like a great feel for the social game. I feel like he's in the great moves, and I know he's a very good liar. And so he has that social touch and the ability to lie, the ability to backstab. And so I can see him doing very well. Really impressed by Kiley. Like she plays this innocent, I'm this stay-at-home mom. I'm so super sweet and do no harm. I think she's going to be really good at playing this game. And then other people I'm super impressed by. I think Jonathan's going to be great this game. I think people are really going to flock to Jonathan. He's got like that great social demeanor. He's played a lot of these games before. So I think he's going to be a great person in this game.
Sweet.
Well, we always like to ask, if you could sum up your game in one word, what would it be and why?
It would be grave digging.
I would pick like Gone Too Soon or like Short. I feel like those are good ones as well.
Yeah, I feel like my read on the game was pretty good, except for the fact that I was public enemy #1 and getting voted out. I feel like a lot of my other reads are probably going to be pretty close to reality.
I agree. And DCP actually has applications out for the next mini. Do you have any advice for players that are looking to apply to that game going in?
Yeah, I would say don't get too worked up about it. Don't make all those tuna sandwiches. Don't buy that brand new backpack with unicorns. Just go into that game and try to have fun. I think I got a little bit too much into my head, having seen the other seasons, thinking Victoria was this such high roller with their Bill elimination going to rocks. So I overplayed and overthought a lot of things, and that can be dangerous.
It's good advice.
Yeah. I feel like go ahead, Mark.
I actually think, you know, just knowing your personality and kind of like your gameplay style, like you would be really well suited for a mini, just because it's like really fast paced. And sometimes like playing a mini, it's better to be the person that's like putting a name out there, because a lot of times your amount of time for strategizing is so short and you never know when it's going to end. And so just having a plan is sometimes like all you need. It doesn't even have to be the best plan. People just want to have a name to write down. So I would love to see you play mini. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, that's really good thought.
Yeah, I would love to just see you play anything again. I mean, obviously we picked you to go deep. I was bummed out when you were voted out. I'm always bummed out when people are voted out, of course. But I mean, we said that you would be one of the most likable people on the season. And I still feel that way that you were, even though Morgan kind of alluded to it earlier, like you were flocked to, or you were creating the flock pretty early on. No one was like exiting the group chats. So, Nick, any last thoughts? Any last couple things you want to add?
No, just rooting for Will. Hopefully he can will his way to victory, and I can't wait to watch the rest of the season.
All right. Well, as always, DCP's episodes go out Mondays and Thursdays, exit interviews Wednesdays and Saturdays, and the episode recaps with Alex Trias will go on Sundays. He's got special guests every week, and the best way to become a special guest is to watch the season. So you got to watch to be on the recaps. But we here at DCP do have a new game for the watchers to play. It is a fantasy game. The prize is a Survivor 42 buff of your choice. The way you play is you pick a person per episode to not go home. If they don't go home, you stay in the game, and you can't pick the same person more than once. So this week, if you would have picked Nick, your ass would be out of the game. But if you picked anybody else, you would still be in the game. So, I mean, there's only two ways you could be eliminated. Pick someone that goes home, or don't pick anybody. But it's a free, no-cost game. The only thing that can happen to you is that you win a buff, and that's it. I mean, we're hopefully going to continue this into later seasons as well, as long as it works out. I mean, Morgan, Lilly, Nick, would you participate if you didn't already know everything that happened in the season?
Sure.
Yes, I would.
Yeah.
Just production and cast, you're ineligible as well. That's also but Nick, it was lovely to have you on the season. I think from the moment you applied to the interactions you had with Morgan and I till the pre-merge chat that was going on, and even after the season, I feel like you've made Morgan and I smile a lot. And like Morgan said, we would love to see you play another game, whether it's one of our minis or one of the other orgs that you'll keep track of in the future. So
That database is coming.
Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll tune in for episode 3 on Monday, April 25th at 8 Eastern on DCP's YouTube. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.